All right. Hello and welcome to class, my beautiful, darling diviners. It is so good to see you. Hopefully, you're seeing the screen. And now my notes. There is a particular premise on which I'm reading these court cards, and like that is the premise of the class, right? So if you have court card questions, like any and all court card questions are welcome, and divination questions as well. I will be your trans Tyra Banks here and not terrorize you as we work through our time together, okay? I drew the Queen of Swords today. So she will be blessing our study and our time together, which I think is actually very apt for this class, like makes so much sense. And so I'm going to be reading from Red Tarot, I figure, my Queen of Swords section while offering, I think this is some cedar smoke. And whilst doing so, I invite you to breathe, to get into as much of like just the zone and draw a court card to call in or claim to embody your sovereignty. Okay, to call in, to claim, to embody your sovereignty. And again, I'm going to be burning some smoke while reading the Queen of Swords. The private world represented is an intimate sphere of Latina love and passion that calls attention to the quotidian pressures that besiege Chicana dykes who must negotiate the task of being public intellectuals and private subjects. And that was from Jose Esteban Munoz. The Queen of Swords is the human emissary of justice, an emanation of Libra scales. She holds the sword upright, yet her head is turned. Despite her emotional attachment to any particular outcome, she is able to make hard decisions and so upholds truth with authority. The Queen of Swords is discerning. She writes and educates. She speaks truth to power. This queen is disposing and dismembering, but for our benefit. She is the one who makes heads roll, the ego killer when cold logic is reigned too righteously. She utilizes and respects the power of language. Her sword clarifies the framings of justice, orientations toward discipline, and perspectives on power. She is experienced in heartbreak, is pierced through deception with her honed perception, and by knowing herself as a survivor, she has done the work to heal and keep healing. The Queen helps beauty become clearly reflected in truth. She recognizes the beauty of truth, a recognition only possible when we move toward the freedom of authenticity and away from the expressions that are bound up in others' expectations, projections, rejections. To hold power always puts one at risk. The throne is never safe from either internal temptation or external threat. The queen must maintain her sovereignty, maintain higher perspective, and honor her responsibility to be of service to the greater harmony of her people. She is often associated with the swan, a cross-cultural symbol attuned to wisdom, music, and speech. In the constellation of Cygnus, Zeus is transformed into a swan in the pursuit of Leda in the act of seduction. High culture is epitomized by the swan, but lurking behind the beauty is a bird of battle, a spiritual warrior. Alchemically, the swan is associated with the albedo, the whitening or the purification of form. The Queen of Swords is the Swan Queen, with shamanic skills of transformation. Behind the subtle beauty of air is the queer power of transfigured creation. The Queen of Swords appears to help us distill knowledge into wisdom. She asks us to speak up, to speak out, and to speak truth. Or she asks us to be silent and still. She offers reading lists and journal prompts. She calls upon critical reflection and our personal experience of law, transgression, justness, and mercy. The Queen brings clarity to our interiority, coming into critical acknowledgement of how our manners of knowing are forged in history and relations of power. As we work to break through personal and collective denial, we are servicing the Queen of Swords. Be true to your heart, she says. She wakes us from collective amnesia, so we cannot forget that all knowledge is forged in histories of social antagonisms. She gives us strategies to deal with contention, challenge reified paradigms, and allow for shifts in social relations. Our education, our perspective, our history, and its stories are not neutral. The Queen is clear about this. She teaches us to assume responsibility for our choices as she helps us confront the limitations of our training and knowledge. As such, she shows authority is maintained by knowing where we lack authority. She recognizes the deep fear of any decentering of the white male canon, while working to clarify the commitment to cultural, intellectual diversities that are truly transformative. She remains both patient and vigilant towards revolution. She does not despair in the face of conflict. As her commitment to truth informs every dimension of her being, she welcomes dissent, rejoices in diversity, and affirms a spirit of intellectual openness. Experienced in critical discussions with authority figures, students, and community members, she gives multi-layered testimony. She knows education as a practice of freedom, and she advocates literacy for all. She defends libraries and public spaces of learning, questioning, and creating. She is recognized as an insurgent intellectual. Students who feel terribly wounded in their psyche seek knowledge that is meaningful. Her court is the classroom, providing an education that heals the uninformed, unknowing spirit within a space of inclusivity. Queen of Swords models the vulnerability of bringing personal narratives into the learning environment in order to dispel the notion that any teacher or authority is all-knowing or that any truth model can be universal. Rather, we can interrogate our lives to generate the theory born from lived experience. I came to theory because I was hurting, Bell Hooks writes. The pain within me was so intense that I could not go on living. I came to theory desperate, wanting to comprehend, to grasp what was happening around and within me. Most importantly, I wanted to make the hurt go away. I saw in theory, then, a location for healing. Such educational practices become acts of resistance. The Queen of Swords challenges us to embrace these processes of self-actualization, see through her sword, and ask what values your habits of being reflect. Ask if they maintain the commitment to freedom, and she will show another dialectic. This queen is unafraid of honesty and is strong enough to let truth dictate her relationships. This means her relationships are ones of integrity, each one a source of power. She is the coolest, emotionally, of the queens. She comes with the wind and the mist before the rain. She is grieved illusory attachments and welcomes reality placed perceptively in a position of higher clarity. This energy suffers no fools, cuts karmic cords, and does not tolerate deceit. She draws strength from boundaries and clear ethical guidelines. She recognizes the constructs and boundaries of her community while pushing against borders of exclusion. She facilitates dialogue, knowing love is at its foundation. The Queen of Swords reminds us our mother tongue cannot be cut out. Her orientation respects multiple subjectivities in the creative act of communication. She is an intellectual, a teacher, a judge, able to read and write the world because she has already lost face and now her self-image is forged in truth beyond loss. She creates spaces to communicate and creates pathways for progress through a calm, loving center. Our darling queen. So, you can draw a card if you haven't and put it in the chat if you have, please. That is for you and your sovereignty to call, claim, and embody your sovereignty. This has been a sort of, I'm trying to maybe I'll have a class or I'm working on something at some point, but 3/4 P's of divination. That typically divination falls categories of practice or use, right? Or application. Prayer, right? Divination is a form of prayer, which can include ritual work, candle work, spell work, but literal just prayer through the cards. Processing, right? A lot of my client work is focused around trauma work and just helping people process and increase emotional tolerance, like affect tolerance, somatic tolerance, working through your shit that your dream, your relationship, etc., your job. Prediction, right? What does it look like if I go here, if I go there, if I do this, if I do that, right? Prediction. And it's almost goes without saying, but must be included as the 4th P, is the pussy. All right, the erotic power of right. Kendra's like right, and of course the world is that pussy card. It is this power of theorizing from the flesh, of the centering of femme, queer authorities of knowing, like authorships and of knowing, right? And so the joy of the world. My goodness, just so embodied. We'll keep going. Let me share my screen again. So keep that in mind as we go through the course, and of course, just as we consider sovereignty, right? I'll start us off with this course will culminate with a self-portrait project. All right, and it was inspired. This is one of my student and beloveds, Steph. who studied with me for many years. And this is from, so in the second year of my 2 year long like deck and walk that I facilitate with students, I'm currently in year two. Students write the way, right? And so they have various projects. And her project for this was self portraiture, and these are for the Libra decans. And so this inspired me. I was like, hold on a minute, I'm loving this. Obviously, she looks fantastic. Um, what was the second? What was that, RJ? Oh, the second P. Excuse me. Sorry, just the P. The second P, processing, prayer, processing, prediction, and pussy. All right, processing. And I will can speak more about that, but I plan on speaking more about that like somewhere formally at some point. And so anyhow, seeing this for the Libra Decans was so inspiring. And then she went from that, put some editing, and made this stunning, amazing image. Obviously, very into Shibari, was very healing in Eight of Swords kind of meditation, swords, Libra meditation, right? Using this, I mean, so fantastic. She is so stunning. So now, I mean, RJ already has the King of Swords, so that you can keep that in mind, RJ. But for the rest of you, you may divine a court card, right? You can choose, or you can choose one that you already have that affinity for, that we've already spoken about, right? Or one that you've noted that you've had trouble connecting with, or right now, again, divine a court card to portray, to embody, to do a self portrait, to channel. Okay. So y'all can be drawing a card if you need to, or in your mind be determining what court card you want to do. Okay. And maybe you're just taking note. You don't have to make the decision like right here, right now, but at least giving yourself some options. So you already have the one that you noted that you're already vibing with, the one that you would like to get to know better, and then maybe the third option for you is going to be a card that you choose right now, that you draw right now. All right. Obviously, we'll take notes over the course on the concepts about posing, portraiture, power, the gaze, self-representation, etc. And then try to find yourself in the chosen card. What aspects do you want to portray or embody or complicate with the court? Right? I included this in like email. I think perhaps when y'all signed up, I took you out of the flow. Maybe, maybe not. But like I posted it elsewhere around like past student portraits. And so Graf in particular, one year, who is bedbound, chose to depict the Knight of Swords, right? Which is such a card of like mobility. And so they were complicating that association to portray their activism and like use of the phone and their like all of it, right? So that's just one example, right? Their partner, Sky, was a very beautiful trans Queen of Cups and on, right? And so attempt to portray perhaps a challenge. This is just challenge. You don't have to do this. The inverse of the court and get into some gender play, some temperance action. For instance, so if you chose the Queen of Wands, which is a water of fire, the inverse would be the King of Cups, fire of water, right? And portrait versus self-portrait. So I also want to say, like, obviously I know y'all are busy, okay? And I don't, like, I mean, I would love, obviously it's amazing. Like, we have a finished gallery at the end of class. You know, this is going to be like the last half or time on the last week, pages week. So you won't really have beforehand, like, to hear the lecture and the class on the pages because you'll be presenting that week. But you will have, you know, so there's that. But it would be great if you don't have, I want to push y'all. I'm not, please don't say, like, you know, if you can do this, please. But also, I'm not trying to stress you out or anything like that. Like, let it be fun, emergent. And if you don't have the time or for whatever reason, then perhaps finding a portrait of, I would say, like, either taking a portrait or finding a portrait of someone like that you know in your family, in your community, could be a secondary option. Okay? But the goal here is self-portraiture. Okay. Okay. So just saying that, right? You'll write an artist statement to accompany your portrait. And you don't actually, I'll just have us share screens. If you want to share it with me, you can, to like, I'll share the screen and like handle the tech part. And then you could obviously read your artist statement aloud as your image is up, right? In this gallery time, we'll give feedback. We want to hear about your process, about all of that, right? Your experience, the inspiration, what changed or evolved your relationship with the court card would be very welcome, or the court cards, right? And so this is to step into the tarot, to inscribe ourselves into the tarot. I have an essay that I wrote on Tina Turner and her inscription as the strength card, and just how meaningful that is. And so that's what I love about tarot, is that it is like y'all are getting to make this a participatory art. You know what I mean? This is going to deepen your relationship with the cards, right? To go from just an observer, right? So face reading, physiognomic, right? Physiognomy. The face is an index of the mind. There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. Some old Verdi, some Shakespeare, right? Face reading. So this card is like, there is a whole system of divination based on reading the face, right? I think in Indian Matchmaker on Netflix, there's a face reader that the matchmaker works with, right? And so we're going to complicate this. We're going to talk about this week because obviously the tarot as a whole, it is a visual practice, and similar to going to a museum, a gallery, the card should change as you look at it, as you think about it, as you talk about it, as you write about it, right? And sometimes that is hard because I will, like, for instance, there's a reading I gave a friend on the trip, and I need to reach out to her because details in the card I didn't speak to at the time, but as I was like, as the cards like in my mind, I was like, actually, this is like a whole other thing that I feel like I need to address, that I saw, like I'm now seeing and thinking about it in my mind's eye, right? So that's the goal, and that's also the practice of looking and having multiple decks, right? And decks in conversation. Now, physiognomic, right? This is a sort of psychological subgenre of genetic interpretation. So that should be pretty complicated already, right? Like someone's genetic appearance, someone's bone structure, someone's skin color, someone's da-da-da is meant to be an insight into their psychology, into their character, right? And there's like formalist, iconographic, like contextual, but there's this various strands, but towards reading the face as an index of the mind. You know, portraits tell stories, right? They are interpretations of their sitters, visual narratives for which we assume that sitters and painters are in varying degrees responsible, right? So they're representations of both the sitter of the portrait and the painter's self-representation, right? They're telling stories. And then, I mean, I'm thinking also, of course, in our modern world, we unlock our phones with our faces, right? So there's like a continuation, strangely, of this like thinking around how much the face is reflective of the inside of the mind, right? By the fact that our face is also a mode of truth for access to like all the shit we got on our on our phones, right? To everything. Okay, so physiognomic strands. Well, the stories that constitute the physiognomic have these four strands of commentary, right? Character, commentary on the sitter's social, political, and professional status. You know, his or her character, their character, personality, their inner being, their moral quality, their state of mind, mood, and emotion. I find that we do that. This is very much a part of tarot reading. I get a card for a client, and you're looking at their card, what the card is doing. It's not a full portrait. We're like proxying portraits through the cards, right? Okay? Where it's like, let me get a card for your partner, or for your boss, or for your child, or for whatever, the place you're gonna go. And then you're like looking at the mood, you're looking at like, are they cheating? Are they yada yada, right? Are they a person of high integrity, right? Then there's the painter, right? There's the painter's characterization and the means by which they produce it, like their painter style, signature style, like the era in which they're producing, etc., right? The image on, like, so more on the like the pose, the appearance is a medium of characterization, like how they are established, I guess. And then the archive, like what also archival data is there about the sitter that confirms or fills out the interpretations of the previous three strands. There's historical information and, of course, speculation about their lives, their behavior, the practices of sitters and painters. Right? This is a self portrait of him. So the artist is painting him, painting a portrait of someone else. Very cool, right? Very cool. Um, so it's like ekphrastic, right? Like this detailed description of a work of visual art as a sort of literary device becomes claim making about character. It's like we get this image of a person, this portrait of a person, and then we start making all these claims about their rank, their behavior, their mood, their emotions, their social status, right? And it's a little bit like circular because sometimes it's like, you go to an art museum and they're like tell you, I don't know, the guide is like telling you all this stuff about the person, but they know all this stuff about the person, and then they're like, can't you see the way that the red of the sash is hanging over or whatever, right? Like shows this particular aspect, but it's that kind of like confirmation bias happening. There's like a tension there, right? Between like how much are you seeing this because you know about the history of this person versus like projecting that into the way the image is made, right? But so the claim that they're working from like shows that there are face physiognomic indicators that can produce a determinate interpretation of character. And that disguises, that claim disguises the fact that like the literary ekphrasis, like the historian's interpretation of this person and their art commentary is influenced and determined by the archive, right? So maybe what, and that's where reading for friends and family gets like there's what is it, like a conflict of interest type of a thing, because you're influenced by your bias of what you know about that person, right? The more you find out, and I mean at the same time, then you ask questions. Simulacrum, right? Yeah, totally with that self portrait, right? So, for example, portrait of Jan 6, 1654, painting Rembrandt, right? So I'll read the slide in a bit, but let me see. So this is like an art historian's comment. So they're like, the shrewd, worldly wise look in his eyes. And he was 36 at this time, but that look in his eyes makes him seem much older than his years. He has this kind of unaffected attitude. He's just come in from the street and is entering his friend's studio and is taking off his gloves and his cape, right? And so Rembrandt observed him, and then in this portrait revealed his innermost being. In terms of like this carefree, unaffected, wise look in the eyes, kind of an energy, right? But then the portrait also is an epitome of like Rembrandt's ideals of this dignified masculinity. There's a quality of a coolness, cool correctness with like a warmth. He's giving the subject of his art traits of this like active, contemplative life, right? For in reality, Jan 6 was a successful poet and a politician. So there's that kind of dignified, I don't know, politician, like charismatic leader, but then the interiority of a poet, right? The automatic gesture of putting on off a glove, about his going, like prefaces his going out into the street, coming in from the street. There's something of like the like the foyer, like the interlude, like the place of going from the public into the private, like, or going from the private into the public, where he's caught without like performing, like he's just like catching him just like in this like transparent brief moment of like getting ready to go between the public and the private. There's like a momentary unawareness of others in the figure of Jan 6 here in the portrait, because he's just like relaxed in that unawareness, in that like I'm not performing for others. So there's a sort of gentle reverie that is thought to be there. These are how people are reading the portraits, right? Like, and getting all this information from knowledge of him, of Rembrandt's style, right? Um, these kind of accounts of the portrait are organized around the information, the knowledge, the art historical knowledge that this person was a businessman, a politician, again, a poet. Um, and the like epithets that describe him are drawn from the qualities, the conventional stock qualities that are attributed to those types, the active, the contemplative life. So his character is produced by treating the image as an index of the archive, in a sense. Um, the image becomes like the nexus point for who's being like the poet, the politician, you know what I mean, and all that we know about him. So again, it's like, oh, we see all that like condensed into this image, and that's how it gets read by art historians, right? The procedure is like based on that physiognomic formula. The face or the body is the index of the mind or the soul, right? But the face or body is replaced by the image here, and the mind or soul by the archive, like the historical archive of what we know about them, and the divine or the natural or social is replaced by the painter. Okay, and so again, explicitly, the aim of art historical physiognomy is to draw the character out of the image, right? Like there's a certain period where the painters, their goal, the portraitists, were like, we need to like have a revelation of this inner character through the art of this person. That is so like tarot reading, the court card, I would say exists in this lineage, right? Or like, and just in particular the court, because they often show up for other people, but also just the cards at large.